Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to throw out a question here to the group for us to start for a little intro. So we're all just going to go around and say who we are and what we love about our job.
Cool. Hi, guys. I'm Rose Mayo. I'm the VP of Marketing at Very Great. We own 3 brands, Wild One, W&P, and Courant. What I love most, I would say, is because we own 3 brands and we're also an omni-channel business, no day is the same. Everything is constantly shifting and evolving, and there's a new challenge to tackle every single day.
Hey guys, I'm Eli Adler. I'm the VP of Strategy at 10,000 Premium Performance Menswear brand, and I love everything about my job, honestly. But I really love that it's in a space that, I think I love, and that is a, very helpful space to be in, and active, and wellness I'm very passionate about, and working in a passion is something that's very exciting.
I'm Connor Swegle. I'm co-founder and a CMO for Priority Bicycles. And what I love most is, especially now, I think with everything that's going on in the world, because we have a lifestyle product that we do need to sell every day, but still we have a big opportunity right now to build stories, to work with content creators, and find strong emotional points for us to build the brand around. So it's a great time to be able to do that. But one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is this balance between DTC and omnichannel. So 14, 15 years ago, Warby Parker came out and really revolutionized things and said, we're getting rid of stores. And then a few years ago, they're like, we have stores. And then we came out of COVID and it was like, DTC is dead. And so we all have some different business models. So I'm wondering for you guys, what is the role of DTC versus omnichannel for you now and looking ahead?
Yeah, I think for us, we run 3 different brands and they were started at different times. W&P was actually started initially as a wholesale business. Actually, even before that, through a Kickstarter campaign for the Mason Jar cocktail shaker, if any of you remember that, was kind of the initial genesis of the brand. It became a very wholesale focused brand initially, and then expanded into Amazon and D2C over time, whereas our other 2 brands were actually started as direct-to-consumer, primary sales channel brands initially, and then have expanded the other direction into Amazon and retail. But for us, I would say we've definitely seen the kind of retail wholesale side of the business as the thing that is growing for us faster than our other channels. To some degree, Amazon is kind of there, but really faster than the direct-to-consumer channel, just because it's about being where the customer is. And also, I think, as we all know, in the direct-to-consumer business, it only gets more expensive. It is not getting any cheaper to operate there. So we see a lot of opportunity in wholesale and retail for the brands.
Yeah, I think similarly, 10,000 started as a direct-to-consumer brand, right? E-com brand. That's sort of where we got our start in 2017. And for us, Omni has been a, I think discovery channel first and foremost, right? And I think a lot about the customer journey. And for me, as to Rose's point, right, digital keeps getting more expensive, right? We think a lot about this idea of arbitrage, where can we find arbitrage? And to me, Omni and retail is that opportunity right now, right? How do we drive awareness at scale that is also revenue accretive?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I don't know if anybody here is working with brands or is part of a brand that is still DTC heavy. I mean, we are direct consumer heavy, and it's just the way that our company was built, the way our pricing structure was set up, there's just not a lot of room, and we have a high price product. So to be able to push the price up more is very challenging to do. So, I think for us, what we try to do is really find the right partners with whom we can have an omni-channel presence with. So Costco's been interesting for us as a partnership because marketing costs are low, margin that goes to them is low, but even moving into the Amazon space or even finding traditional retail partners for us is really challenging. So I think for us, we have to scramble to try and find ways to really make the most and find scale with our messaging and marketing because we still remain pretty strongly direct to consumer. So it's a big challenge for us. And I think it presents a lot of marketing challenges for us. I'm curious for you guys within the spectrum of where you're at, what is it for your overall marketing strategy? How has it changed, or how do you approach your marketing strategy within the omnichannel space?
I think for us as a brand that is, really now starting to push into the physical world, going back to the idea of the journey, right? Retail or wholesale is not one size fits all, right? Different business, different, accounts, if you will, right? Sort of very different purposes. And our marketing, when you think about, our digital business, we still think about it as the e-com business as like the primary sales channel. It's a place that we have full control over the experience and over sort of like the world of 10,000, right? The culture that we're trying to build. And for us, I think about retail as we've like started to flex this muscle as, you know, discovery, right? The same way that like Meta 5-7 years ago was a world of cheap CPMs, a lot of awareness at scale. Being in the right doors, right, I think is helping us to drive that in places where we aren't as relevant. People, you know, interact differently with the brands they care about. And, you know, there's that world. And then there's also this idea of quote unquote, like brand forward doors, I think. And for us, it's just sort of how do we like put each one of these doors in a bucket and all think about it in the context of this journey. And then sort of all coming back to like, at the end of the day, what I'd love and what I think is important is how do we get people to keep coming back to like our site, the world of 10,000 with these wholesale retail doors is like step one.
Yeah, for us, I would say we think about our marketing strategy as really like it's the decoupling, I would say, of decoupling digital from e-commerce as a sales channel, right? E-commerce or direct to consumer is a sales channel. It is not your brand. It's not even necessarily your strategy. It's how you're selling to the product, right? So we think a lot about how do we build a digital brand or a digitally native brand that can reach customers in whatever sales channel they're in, whether that's Amazon, walking into a store, walking into a Costco, or choosing to shop online. So we focus a lot on building the community around the brand and building that sense of awareness and engagement so that whether you come to our site and you buy from us or you walk into a store and you see our product on the shelf, you're making that connection and going, I recognize this brand, I want to purchase this brand because I feel a connection to it at that level ultimately. So when we do a lot of our marketing strategy has started to shift less focused on, I would say, to some degree, the like meta driving the sale in the moment, and more so thinking, how can we make our marketing work really hard for us to raise awareness overall, whether they choose to come to the site or maybe they come and browse the site and then they see us when they go in a store next week.
Within the, so you guys talk about meta and moving away from meta for a variety of reasons, and I don't know if people are kind of feeling that same way. Seems
Hopefully
to be.
No one here works for Meta.
Yeah, anybody here from Meta? We love it. It's great. But it does change how you sharpen the point of your marketing message, right? Because you don't necessarily wholly control it. You know, you can wholly control your marketing message within Meta because you're making the ads and you're uploading them yourself. I'm wondering within this, how do you have to change your marketing message? I don't know if there's anything you can speak to specifically from the brands in terms of like how you're managing that engagement, knowing that you are now going to be relying on other partners or retail partners to share the message. So how have you changed your marketing approach given that you control less of the message moving forward?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's about making sure before you even get into like another sales channel or you're creating collateral around it, et cetera, is making sure you understand what's the ultimate through line to your mission and vision that has to be present consistently. Because especially as you start to expand into physical retail, making adjustments to your message and your packaging and everything else gets a lot harder, right? It's much easier to say, hey, this isn't working for us, so we feel like the packaging looks really blah when somebody gets it and is unboxing it through direct-to-consumer. All right, fine, you make a change, you can overhaul all of those things, and you've got new packaging rolling out fairly quickly, right? But when you're in a physical retail store, you can't say, hey, Target, we want you to take all of our product off the shelf so we can repackage it and then put it all back out there and do the same thing with however many other physical places you might be in. So you have to think about what is that through line that can be there consistently over time. And especially as you grow and expand into different points of distribution, it gets harder. It's never all going to be in the same place at once, right? Maybe you digitally update your messaging strategy or you're trying a new angle through, Instagram, social media, et cetera, or through your ads that maybe you can't bring to retail immediately. Digital is a great testing ground for that though, for us to figure out like what might work, what might resonate with people. And if we find something that has a really strong connection point, then we can bring it into the physical product, the physical signage that might be in a store, for example. So digital is a great kind of like proving ground for us because we can react quickly, but we always have to kind of keep in mind of like what might a customer see when they walk in a store, because you don't want what you're putting out online to feel so far removed from what might be in a store that they don't make that connection when they walk in and see you.
I think the biggest change, and I agree with a lot of that for us, is we are still primarily e-com, right? Like that is a big part of our business. I think the biggest thing that's changed for us is in the digital world, on Meta, on our site, right? Like that is our world. And I think for us, it was figuring out what the right message is in a retail door where you're surrounded. I think there's an advantage and a disadvantage, right, to being surrounded by like other brands in your world, right? And I think for us, it was how do we speak more directly against or with them, if you will, right? If we're sitting next to 4 other brands in this space, I think it was that. And I think the other big thing that changed is really thinking about, you know, retail as a like sales channel, right? So from a customer journey perspective, right, if we say, okay, you know, we have like 3 core shorts, right, that drive the vast majority of our business. And in wholesale, one thing that changed for us was we're going to tell the story of like, let's get somebody into these products, right, get them into our ecosystem, and then we open up the like digital world of the long tail of our assortment. I think for us, the big thing that changed was sort of needing to be more intentional about exactly like what we're saying to whom, when, because in digital, you can kind of, to your point, like test, iterate very quickly. And in wholesale, it all takes a longer, you know, period.
How are you guys managing the consumer marketing versus, as you expand in retail, the B2B marketing aspects? And this is probably something that you guys are dealing with in a big time with new partners end of last year and this year, right? So how do you start to manage either whether it's a culture change or whether it's just, it's been a natural progression? How are you manage the different types of marketing needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, right, like the end user is the customer, whether their journey is see us on Meta to site to purchase or see us in an Equinox to purchase, right? So I think the way we think about it, right, is like the sell to the retailer, right, and there's something we've done a lot about, is much more sort of like business casey, right? You know, training is growing, the brands in the space are more legacy, whatever it might be. But thinking about how we actually like sell to the end user, like the customer walking into the door, the customer finding us on Meta, I honestly actually don't think like a ton has changed it, right? Like I said, it's another channel to us, but like our core message is the same, our core value prop is the same. The step before that of the sell into the door, right? Like thinking about, you know, the retail world for a second, right? There's like sell in and there's sell through. The sell in is like, how do we get into whatever door we want to get into? The sell through is like, how do we sell it to the you know, end user? That part, like the selling it to the athlete, hasn't really changed, I would say, in a ton.
I think for us, it is actually a little bit different in that, to your point, ultimately you need the end consumer to purchase the product. But when you're getting into omni-channel, wholesale type selling, especially depending on what industry you're in, there's a lot of points of selling that happen before it gets to the customer that add a lot of layers of complication, right? So we have to think about, we do want that unified message that is going to be there both when we're speaking about it internally and at the end point when the customer is purchasing it. But we also have to think about, okay, we're trying to convince someone at, a Costco to carry our product. And then they have to go convince their boss to carry our product. And then it maybe goes through another round of internal review. So you have to think about all these different touch points of what's going to help you make it through all of those rounds. Or in other cases, you might be working with like a third-party distributor. W&P, because we're in the kitchen space, sells a lot to, we work with a lot of grocery stores. So we often work with third-party brokers who we then have to make sure they have the right sales materials to effectively do their job and sell us in. So there's a lot of added layers as you grow and expand that you have to consider. Again, what's that through point that needs to always be there? But how does this shift and change depending on who I'm talking to? Because most retailers do not care how much money, like if you're trying to get into Target or a Costco or Walmart or wherever else, they do not care at all what your sales are in e-commerce. They don't care if you're doing $1 million or if you're doing $100 million. What they care about and why they're buying you as a digitally native brand is they want the audience that you can bring to them. They want the customer who cares about your product, and they want to tap into that community. Often they're trying to, for example, someone on my team just shared an article this morning in one of our group chats about Walmart is attracting a wealthier customer. And because wealthier customers are starting to come in store, Walmart is also trying to make a play to bring in the brands that's going to connect with them, right? So having a brand that has some sort of cachet or tap into that audience is really important. But again, you could be doing $100,000 in sales a year. You could be doing 100 million. They don't care. They want the audience when they're purchasing you. So that's a really important consideration for us when we're thinking about how do we make sure our audience information and what we can bring. The first party data we get out of our D2C is very valuable in those relationships. But again, it's ultimately not about the sales volume.
I think to that point, right, like one thing that we've learned is that what these doors care about is the customer that you open them up to, but also like the first principal metric that they often want is like turnover per square foot, right? And I think to that point, one thing that tactically speaking has changed is the beauty of retail when done right is that like you have a community of evangelists that are like speaking to your product. So I think that one thing that has changed is this idea of, to your point, education and like training, right? Product is not like sitting on a rack, right? Is not going to sell itself. What sells itself is the journey and the brand and like knowing how to talk about it. And I think for us, what we've realized is that the big driver in our first couple seasons was the more that we were like on the floor, like teaching people how to speak to the brand, how to talk about the brand, the better we did. Because I just think like people go into doors, people go shop physically, like looking for that connection, right? Looking for somebody to explain, looking for like the opportunity to discover. And I think that for us was a real unlock figuring that out.
How do you manage that at scale? So we were kind of talking about this earlier. There's a thing called RAGBRAI. Anybody from Iowa? Anyone else from Iowa? Just one? No.
Just me.
Just one. So there's a 7-day ride across Iowa, 500 miles. I recommend it to everybody. And so we do when we do events like that, we create true evangelists because you get everything that you want out of like of earning a customer. You get a shared journey, you get achievement, you get struggle together. So like you can create customers for life, but there's scale challenges to it, right? So like if we take people on a ride, we get the best experience. We can only take 20 people. Like we're not gonna get a $5 million growth in one of our bike areas by doing 15-person rides, but they're super important. So I'm wondering, you talk about like being on the floor, getting with the athlete, like what is the role of IRL with your customers or to grow customer base when you are trying to grow, in much bigger numbers than you did a few years ago?
Yeah, I think about IRL in a couple of ways, right? There's like the retail wholesale discussion of scale, right? How do we get into a lot of doors that are brand aligned, that talk to the people we want to be talking to? But for us, and I think that's actually a really good example, right? We've always been very, very focused on brand marketing, right? Things that are less linear, that can like drive sort of that arbitrage, that non-linear growth. I think for us, the way that we've thought about it is to date, right, as just D2C brand, to your point, like doing a lot of events, right, with 15, 20 people at each one of those events is not going to necessarily move the needle. But what happens when you start doing it at scale, and what we've thought about a lot is how do we spur word of mouth, right? Because if there's 20 people at this thing that tell 20 people that tell 20 people that tell 20 people, or if you're doing it at scale, I think that's when it starts to have a real impact. And for us, retail just became another way to do that, right? It's a place to activate. It's a place to activate into. And I think that the hard part, right, is that it is harder to track than a Meta where you're driving millions of impressions a day, but the impressions are that much more powerful. And again, if we think about it as part of this journey, right, if they're like discovering us or they're seeing it on their Instagram or, all this cool stuff we're doing, then they see the ad, then they end up in a door, right? It's a piece of that sort of like unified stepping through every stage of their decision matrix.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is also a really, I used to work at an agency before this, so apologies because I'm going to say something very agency-like, but it's that idea of you want to be everywhere where the customer is. I used to always give my clients the example of if I'm on the subway into work, right, and I'm listening to a podcast, scrolling through social media, and I'm surrounded by ads on the subway, ideally I'm seeing your brand in a few of those places, right? Because if I'm just listening to the podcast and I'm scrolling on my social media, I might scroll right past your ad. But if I scroll past it and it just clicks a little bit in my brain, brain just enough that then when I hear your podcast ad later, I go, oh yeah, I saw that brand somewhere earlier, right? And you make that connection point, and then you walk into a store. I had a client once that I worked with in the, they're in the alternative like plant-based meat space. And I started working with them, and the next week I walked into my grocery store and it was there. And I had this moment of, was that always there? Or did that just show up there? Like, am I just making this connection because I just got exposed to this brand, right? So it is very much about, I think, like that level of exposure and like getting it through a bunch of different ways. I also think, to your point of, you know, the in-person events, like you never know when and how those are going to pay off, right? You might not be able to reach a lot of people at once, but sometimes you might get someone there who helps you get your foot in the door somewhere else, or who can help you with a bigger growth opportunity. They're great for content. You can get a lot of content and UGC out of them that can then have scale. You can run them as ads. You can integrate them into your site. You can do features on people you're bringing to those events, you know, that you can send out and tap into community that way. And they're also a great way to show your retail partners, hey, we can get people to show up for you.
Yeah, I feel like to what you're talking about, the orchestration, like I was thinking about it with Super Bowl ads this year, and it was the first time where what you saw wasn't just a unified message. So it wasn't like, oh, the print ad, you know, and then like the social ad. But what it was that you had a press release come out about the new product. Then you had the influencer agency started running their stuff on social, orchestrated with what was happening on the commercial spot. And so that the through line of the message was almost on the different extensions was almost more important than just the ad itself, which I thought was really successful. And I feel like something for us in the same way, like if we can do an IRL event and we can cover our costs, but we'll just shoot the shit out of it and then create ads from it, at least I can feel like we're covered on it. And then the question is scale, how many do you want to do? And what can your brand support in terms of volume of those ads?
Yeah, and I think too, it's like we were we co-host the Miami Marathon. We were there a couple weeks ago. We brought 50 athletes down to run the marathon in 30-pound weight vest, which was not easy. I did it. I'm still recovering.
Flex.
Not really.
Flex.
I did it very, very slowly. But you know, in the moment, right? It can be hard to say, oh, like what are these 50 guys doing this? You know, like what is that going to do? But what we saw, like very quantitatively, was this like massive growth in organic traffic that came after it, because we, you know, intentionally, if you bring the right people in these events, these like IRL moments, right? We had, you know, basically 50 people with like hundreds of thousands of followers each posting about it, talking about it. And then if you're in this world, right, and you're seeing it from this guy you follow and that guy you follow, and you're seeing it on our Instagram and you're seeing it through our emails, like you're seeing it, you know, both like on our own channels, but then like in this earned world. And it sort of starts driving this flywheel. And then it was in Miami, and we have, you know, retail doors in Miami. So we started driving people into those. And again, it's all part of that, you know, journey that I keep talking about. I think is so important.
You should have worn the weight vest today.
I don't think I don't think I'd be sideways across this stage.
Are there questions? I think we've got 5-ish or so minutes, but are there any questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Josh. I run a retention agency. So I'm curious about Eli, you mentioned bridging the gap between the discovery of core products in retail into the long tail of whatever you have in the rest of your collection. How do you bridge that gap between a relationship that you don't own and don't control to one that you can own online?
I think it's a really good question. I think a lot of it is the wholesale like asset, if you will, right? So we're very proud of our, you know, what the product itself, but how we package, how we talk about it, all of that. And I think for us, it's honestly like selling the product, right? And the product is so good that you will, you know, find it. And again, it gets back to the idea of like, we do put a lot of our dollar into Meta still, for example, right? And I think for us, it's like we, an e-com, I've like always had very, very strong retention rates partially because the product, I believe, speaks very, very well. And I think for us, it was sort of cool. Like, we've got you in the door in wholesale. You're in our interval short. We're going to start, you know, again, sort of thinking about how we like talk to you on ads, right? If you're in, you know, like we do a lot with Lifetime, for example, right? Like we're in Lifetime Fitnesses in a very big way. You know, how do we start sort of showing up around you to then feed you the rest of the assortment and get you into the world? It's not easy, right? Because we don't own the relationship. We don't have the data. We don't have their email. but it's what we've seen is once we get people in the door, right, and they continue to, keep seeing us, they'll eventually like search out 10,000.cc and enter our world, and then we have them, and then once they're there, then we can talk to them way more frequently and really control that message.
Any other questions? Don't be afraid.
Any other questions? This is your time. This is your time. Hard-hitting questions.
Well, Josh, to your question. Josh, to your question, I think what's interesting for us is we've actually thrown that problem back on product. Because since we aren't allowed, I mean, you can get the information from other retailers, but you're not allowed to use it. So a lot of that, even through like warranty, we have to fence that information. So a lot of what we've done is push it back on product to be able to create closely differentiated product that is strong enough to sit at price point in retail that will give a customer that we feel confidently gives them a reason to come over onto our PriorityBicycles.com or one of our other brands and start their search journey there. And it's a challenge for them because you don't ever want to feel like you're just creating knockdown product, especially like for us. I mean, actually, at any price point, it's a challenge. You don't want somebody to just say, oh, well, does this have lesser features because it's less? So we really have to, from a product perspective, sharpen the pencil on being able to say that this product has this amazing value at this price point, and then you can sort of search up and down that price line. And as much as we want people to search by feature set and what we love about the product, nobody's going to do it. They're going to start with price. They're going to find their way. They're going to find their tier, and then they're going to hone in on features. So it's a big challenge. And like I said, luckily, us on the marketing side, we've been like, sorry, product, figure it out.
Yeah, I just to echo that, I do think product is a lot of what drives your ability to retain people, because you got a 50-50 shot at best of getting them onto your e-commerce site after they buy product in store. So one, you need to have a strong product that they enjoy using, and they're like, cool, I'm glad I spent the money on this product when I walk into the store. And then it's thinking about, okay, are they maybe going to come look us up online and see what else we have? Or next time they go in the store, are they going to look for what else we as a brand sell, right? So it's thinking about what else can you get in that retail door and what makes sense for your brand. If you think about your product roadmap, you don't want it to be driven solely by wholesale by any means, but when you're thinking about your product roadmap, thinking about how is this going to sit on a shelf potentially at a retail partner and help us expand our audience with that product too.
Cool. Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause for our panelists? We really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.